I know Mike Johnson believes Donald Trump lacks seriousness, but I did not expect him to express it so plainly. And that is exactly what happened this morning. Donald Trump is making it harder by the day for Republicans to defend him, especially Speaker Johnson, who is deeply concerned about losing his majority, not just in the midterms, where a major defeat is widely expected, but even before then. We're going to break down what Mike Johnson said about Donald Trump and one of Trump's latest proposals. It can even be called that. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you enjoy the channel and haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. It genuinely helps support our work. Now, before we get into Johnson's remarks, which amount to one of the clearest rebukes he has ever made of Trump, I want to start with how Trump created this tension himself, announcing a policy about credit cards based on a law that does not exist, but that he apparently believes does.
With no help from the Fed, because we have a total stiff at the Fed.
The announcement on the cap on credit card interest rates went out on Friday. What happens if a credit card companies don't comply by the January 8th?
Well, then they're in violation of the law. Very severe things. No, I want a cap on credit card interest rates because, some of them are 28, almost 30%. And that people don't know they're paying 30%. The people out there, they're working and they have no idea that they're paying 30%. No way. We're putting a 1-year cap at 10%. And that's it. They know it. They've really abused the public. The credit card companies have totally abused it. I'm not going to let it happen.
Now, is it outrageous that banks make 30, 40, even 50% margins off extreme credit card interest rates? Absolutely. Is Donald Trump the person to solve that problem? Absolutely not. Donald Trump has no interest in fixing affordability issues. He has no interest in confronting Wall Street. Donald Trump is among the most financially compromised politicians we have ever seen. Let's be honest. Miriam Adelson gave Donald Trump roughly $250 million and has pledged to do so again to support an illegal third term in exchange for policy priorities tied to gambling interests and Israel. Trump is backed by Wall Street financiers, tech billionaires, and corporate donors. He reportedly asked the oil industry for $1 billion in exchange for favorable treatment. Donald Trump is not going to cap credit card interest rates. Let's be very clear about that. And if he truly cared about financial fraud or consumers being exploited, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau would still be intact. We might still have protection for flight cancellations, junk fees, and predatory lending. But those safeguards are gone because Trump has no genuine interest in governing. That's what makes it so outrageous that he's pretending to champion this issue now. It would be a worthwhile fight, and Elizabeth Warren has said as much, which may explain why Mike Johnson felt compelled to respond.
Donald Trump gave me a call.
And what did you guys talk about?
Well, we talked about, remember, Donald Trump had raised this question early on about putting a cap on credit card interest rates. And I had said at the time when he announced this a year ago, I had said, great. I had been proposing that for years. Let's do it. And what's Donald Trump done since then? Nothing. And while I had a chance to talk to him, I raised the question of how we reduce housing costs. We've got a bill that has passed the Senate unanimously to expand the supply of housing, but Republicans over in the House have hung it up. And Donald Trump has not lifted a finger to get that bill passed on through. Look, what I talked about this morning is the importance of Democrats fighting to lower costs. And for me, that's what this is all about. That's what the conversation was all about, how to get costs down for American families.
Elizabeth Warren, who fought relentlessly to protect the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau from attacks by Donald Trump and Elon Musk, has made this clear. And it's worth noting that Musk targeted the CFPB not because of waste or fraud, but because it functioned as a regulatory authority overseeing his business practices. That's not surprising. Warren could actually get something like this done. A progressive Democratic president could. 2. Donald Trump will not. This should not be treated as a serious proposal, and Trump should not be credited for something he has no intention of delivering, especially when Republicans themselves are pushing back. Some loyalists will always fall in line, and their attacks on Kamala Harris for proposing similar policies have already backfired. But what was most striking was Mike Johnson's response, which amounted to openly questioning Trump's judgment.
Speaker, President Trump is proposing a 10% cap on credit card interest rates as a part of an affordability push. How much support is in your caucus for that?
I talked with him about it briefly yesterday, and he is the president is the ideas guy, and what he's doggedly determined to do and laser focused upon doing is the same thing that we are, and that is reducing the cost of living, bringing down prices for the American people, and he's looking at every idea under the sun to do that. It's one of a large menu of ideas that have been proposed as something we ought to think about and investigate. Since I had the conversation with him, I've talked to a number of colleagues about that and what that would mean, and are there unintended consequences of that? And it's a complicated area. So I don't know. Like everything else, you would need legislation to do something like that, and we'd have a lot of work to build consensus around it. But you got to be very careful if you go forward in that. In our zeal to bring down costs, you don't want to have negative secondary effects of that. So, for example, one of the things that the president probably had not thought through, and others at first glance, it sounds great. We should bring down, interest rates to 10%. It would help everybody, all borrowers. There's a lot of Americans who have a lot of credit card debt. But then, what some of the experts have said is, well, but the problem is if you do that, then the credit card companies, the negative secondary effect is that they would just stop lending money, and maybe they cap what people are able to borrow at a very low amount, and then that would have a negative effect on a lot of people who work on revolving credit. So
January 6th, allegations of protecting abusers, illegal wars, war crimes. There are countless reasons Mike Johnson could have taken issue with Donald Trump, but no. What finally crossed the line was the idea of reducing banks' profit margins. That's what did it. Johnson argued that banks would stop lending and that the credit card industry would collapse. That claim doesn't hold up. But the fact that Johnson challenged Trump at all, something he rarely does, is notable. Johnson has largely functioned as a loyal surrogate. Yet this is the moment he chooses to push back. He appeared willing to overlook virtually everything else, but not an attack on the financial sector. It's particularly striking given Trump's appearance in Michigan today, attempting to promote his economic agenda, a phrase that can only be taken loosely. Trump knows the economy is his biggest vulnerability because his policies have done the most damage. That's why he is so fixated on Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. It's not just about interest rates. Trump wants to portray the Federal Reserve as a shadowy, deep state entity responsible for economic pain, distracting from the fact that Trump's tariffs have fueled inflation and job losses. Last year alone, the U.S. lost roughly 65,000 manufacturing jobs, largely due to tariffs. And what did those tariffs achieve? Symbolic gestures and personal favors for Trump. That's the pattern. The tariffs are about vanity and leverage, not policy. Much like Trump's fixation on Greenland. Another issue Mike Johnson surprisingly criticized.
I don't think anybody is considering that. I mean, it's not been in any briefing I've been in, and I go to all of them. Okay, it's not. This is not a. I think this is a media narrative that's been created. I do. We've been very clear. I mean, the article.
It's remarkable to hear Mike Johnson express concern at all. He appears to be signaling to Trump, "Please don't do this. It would be disastrous." Johnson suggested that no rational person would ever pursue something like putting boots on the ground in Greenland. But the problem is obvious. He is dealing with Donald Trump. Johnson seems to believe there is still a line Trump won't cross, despite all evidence to the contrary. It's difficult to understand Johnson's political calculation at this point. He appears primarily focused on preventing a Republican resignation and holding his conference together at any cost. In doing so, he allows Congress to be sidelined entirely, while Trump exploits that weakness, pushing the boundaries of the Constitution and putting the country at risk. And that's why Representative Jason Crow directly confronted Trump's increasingly aggressive posture, saying this:
that when elites like Donald Trump bang the war drums and pound their chests in Washington, D.C., and talk about sending troops into the ground or into combat, he's not talking about his kids. He's not talking about all of his minions' kids. He's talking about kids like me and the people that I grew up in working class areas, rural places around the country that have to pick up rifles, jump in the tanks or helicopters, and do the thing.
We do not need boots on the ground in Greenland. We do not need to escalate conflicts unnecessarily. If strategic security is a concern, focus on existing alliances and Ukraine. Jason Crow was absolutely right to call this out, and we will continue to do the same on this show every single day. If you want to support that work, please subscribe and leave a like on the video. And if you made it to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Keep fighting. Don't let them silence you. Until next time, I'll see you